So I was looking at the BBC webpage yesterday, and I noticed Monday morning that Ukraine has now been bumped down to their second top item. Replacing it is the cost of living. So, just as the European population starts to get really fed up with sending billions to Ukraine for a war that can't possibly be won and should have been negotiated away right at the beginning, back in April, we've now got this instead. Now, before we get into this topic, I'm just going to highlight a freemium article that we got available. So, as you know, we've been making items available from our premium section, free for everybody to access, and this is now going up. This is going to be available for a week. It's our fantastic interview with Helen Dale, although what I would say is you should really just sign up for the premium account. It does cost only £5, and that's about the same cost as a pint of beer these days. Now, look, if you met this man in a pub, you'd buy him a pint of beer, wouldn't you? So don't do that because he drinks too much. Sign up for a premium account instead. That's what you've got to do.
I can't dispute that claim, I'll be honest.
Or do both. Right. So, yes, let's talk about the inflation crisis that we've got at the moment, or as it's otherwise known, the government printed far too much money in the beginning of 2020. The official inflation rate, if we just scroll down a little bit on this page from the Bank of England, the official inflation rate is currently 10.1%. Now, I don't actually believe that number. I think it's higher than that. But just that number alone is quite devastating. What that means is that if you don't get a pay rise in 8 years, not 10 years, in just 8 years, the purchasing power of your wages will halve. So if you're earning 50 grand today and you think that's a pretty good income, all you need to do is not get a pay rise for 8 years and you have the purchasing power that somebody earning 25 grand today has. So this is going to be a colossal impact to us all. Now, where is that value going to go? Well, that value is going to accrue to people higher up the value chain. So could be your employer, and it could be anyone else along that value chain. And of course, it's going to be government as well, because they're not lowering their tax thresholds during any of this. So it is going to be a massive transfer of wealth from the wage earners to the owners of capital and the government as well.
It's also interesting that during the COVID crisis, they gave themselves a pay rise. The MPs did.
They didn't.
They were happy to get quite comfy, weren't they?
They did indeed. So let's take another look at this BBC segment. So they've got a whole topic now on cost of living. Now they've got various stories listed down below on this one. They've got the story from Wales of a woman who says that her children are asking her if they will be able to eat. We've got one slightly above there, which is a man from Derby is asking, do I have to leave the UK because of interest rates rise? But I wanted to focus on this one here from Wessex, which is this single mum, 28-year-old single mum here, Alexandra Mitchell, who has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, who is having to seek refuge in Chelmsford Library because it's cheaper. And she's saying that her children don't know why they're there. Now, being a parent of young children myself, I can confirm that 1-year-olds and 3-year-olds quite often don't understand why they've gone to any particular location. But this is the heartbreaking story that we're getting from this. Now it gets worse.
I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if you start just seeing pensioners going into a Wetherspoons and buying the 99p refillable coffee and just sitting there all day to take advantage of the heating.
Well, to be fair, they do that already, and all power to them. But this is becoming increasingly a thing. So, as we go into this story, we see the case of young Chitsuwelu, if I'm pronouncing that right. Chitsuwelu and her friends have taken to seeking refuge from the mild November weather. By hanging out in the library and adopting the free Wi-Fi, such as the cost of living impact that we are having to escape from it as best we can. Now, I'm wondering if this whole segment and the people's reaction to it, I'm sure it's something that we've all encountered as well, the cost of living is going up, maybe that is going to make people start to think that just possibly shutting down the economy for 2 years and spaffing 400 billion in the process, not to mention the additional billions that we've spaffed off to Ukraine and keeping immigrants in hotels, perhaps some of that was a bad idea.
So you think the inadvertent effect of the BBC trying to manufacture consent about a worsening economic circumstance will actually radicalise people in the opposite direction and go, well, shouldn't I start to be critical of government policy that is eviscerating all my tax money?
Well, very possible. That's the hope. You can certainly see why they had to go via Ukraine. You couldn't go straight from lockdowns to making this the new current
No, because that was their fault.
You had to have something to break it up. Otherwise, people might push back against that.
Wasn't it interesting how they accelerated lifting lockdown the decisions and vaccine passports on that about a week after they had the Ukraine briefing?
It was quite a seamless switch, yeah. So you're very impressive how they did it. Now, of course, I want to make a story, give you a story that everybody can really relate to, and so I've gone to this one. This is, City of London. There's a lovely little pub right in the middle of all the banks. It is one of the oldest pubs in London. This is a place that dates back to 1757. It's been going for 260 years, so it is almost 130 times older than the Lotus Eaters, which is celebrating its 2-year anniversary tomorrow, and there will be special segments on it then. But this is a business that has survived everything that London could throw at it for 260 years, and the COVID crisis managed to get it. So if a business that old is going to go under, you can imagine that plenty of other hospitality businesses have. So thinking about this level of inflation that we've got, I told you that I didn't really believe that number of 10%. There's a lovely little website that I like, which is called Trueflation. Now, what this website does is it calculates independently the true rate of inflation, and they are coming up with a figure of almost 17% inflation, which I think you would agree is probably far more realistic. That's probably more what you're experiencing in your personal lives.
Definitely in supermarkets.
Exactly right. And they also break down some of the categories within that. So I thought that housing was quite interesting. They're calculating a inflation rate on housing, so rents and mortgages, of 30% at the moment.
Isn't it interesting how 52% of all women in the UK over 30 are childless, and yet the housing demand just keeps going up? I wonder where it's all coming from.
Yeah, if only there was some sort of explanation for that we covered recently. The other one is utilities. Utilities have gone up at 83%.
Bloody hell.
So yeah, this is where some of this is going. Now, that headline inflation rate of 17%, I told you earlier that if you didn't get a pay rise, you would effectively halve your purchasing power in just 8 years. If you calculate it at 17%, it comes down to just 5 years. So the only thing that you need in order to halve your ability to purchase is to not get a pay rise for 5 years at these current levels of inflation. This genuinely is a crisis, and we're gonna hear all about why the government thinks that they can shift the blame for this. So,
can I ask a quick question then?
Absolutely.
On the prior part where they were breaking it down by, so I understand the consumer price index creates the inflation level because it takes a broad average, right? Am I right?
Well, and they game it. They've gamed it for years and years to try and get things out of it.
So if you were to take out lifestyle dependent things, for example, like alcohol and tobacco, if you don't drink and you don't smoke, wouldn't that mean that your share of your money that is actually going towards stuff is going to be worse affected if you I don't know how I'm phrasing this properly.
Well, I mean, actually, that is how they game it. So what they do is they include loads of substitutions effects. So actually, the official CPI is a really good measure if you live in your mother's basement and you consume digital media. You watch Netflix and you rent pizzas and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Then actually, the official CPI is a pretty good metric for you. If you do anything in the real world, like say you want to rent a place or you want to have a mortgage or something, the CPI has been twisted over the years to make sure that it doesn't really apply to you, and that's why we all feel so disconnected from the official inflation rate.
So if you're a parasitic Kuma, you'll be paying far less as a proportion of your income. However, if you're a responsible homeowner with a family, you are going to be bitten in the backside.
Exactly, because they love putting substitutions in for digital streaming services, that kind of stuff, which has been coming down, but that's not really a high quality of life. Now, so the governments are going to try and tell us that it's all Putin's fault.
Yep.
Don't believe that, because even in the UK, the official inflation rate was at 5% back in January. And that was before the Russian-Ukraine conflict started, so we're not going to accept that one. Over in the colonies, one of them is having an election at the moment. Over in the colonies, they're very sensitive to their gas prices, their petrol prices, and Biden is now taken to tweeting out every time it comes down a couple of cents. I'm not sure why they're quite as upset about it as they are, because if you work that out, that comes to about 60 pence per litre.
We would love to dream of
yes,
that.
we would love to have fuel prices that low. But the way Biden's got to it is by draining down the SPR reserve. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is there just in case the US gets invaded or it suddenly finds itself in a war with China, it used to have over 1,000 days of reserves in it, and Biden has taken it down to just 22 days in an attempt to win the election.
Trump tried to replenish it entirely, and Congress blocked him from doing it.
Yeah,
That's
and he
very
tried to do it when the
interesting.
oil price had turned negative.
Yes.
So yes, that's the advantages of having Democrats in your political system. Right, so let's go back to that BBC side, and we're going to pull apart. I decided it might be fun to fact check one of these segments. So the Bank of England have provided BBC with 5 things that they feel that they know about the economy. So the first one that they say is that the UK is set for a 2-year recession. Now, I'm actually quite happy with that one. I think that they probably are going to have at least a 2-year recession, and that's because we spent 2 years strangling the economy with lockdowns, and now we're asphyxiating them with high energy prices, inflation, and tax rises.
And horrible net zero policies, which will prolong
Exactly.
until
So
2030.
at least 2 years of recession. So I'm going to give a thumbs up on the fact check to that first section. Next, unemployment rate to nearly double. So I believe the current unemployment rate is officially about 3.5%, and the Bank of England here is saying that they expect it to go up to 6.4%. Now, I'm sure that unemployment is going to rise. However, I'm going to take issue with the numbers that they've got there, because again, I don't really trust the official numbers. I prefer to look at the labour force participation rate. So this is all the people of working age who could have a job. Now, if you look at it from that perspective, the unemployment rate is actually 22%. Now, there will be some of those people who don't want a job. You know, there could be people who have made so much money trading shitcoins and meme stocks that that they feel that they can have a little bit of time off. There will be people who are stay-at-home parents who won't be looking for a job, and you know, certainly a lot of us were forced into that situation over the last couple of years as they shut down schools. But nevertheless, it is a useful measure because it's not gamed by officialdom in any respect. Now, the labour force participation rate had reached an all-time high just before COVID, and now we're looking at you know, a multi-year low. As the unemployed on this metric goes to 22%. So again, don't trust the official numbers. I think that there's something going terribly wrong there as well.
Well, they're gamed anyway by the fact that, as well, the David Cameron government caused a mass influx of eligible working age 16-year-olds into colleges, sixth forms, eventually universities via the Tony Blair school to uni pipeline. That means that lots of people were taken out of the economy to fudge the numbers, but things didn't get cheaper to be a student or 16 to 18, and so it just meant lots of people couldn't get a head start in earning a living and instead got themselves into debt.
Yeah, that's the future for young people, certainly debt. Third item, they tell us that mortgages could rise by £3,000 a year. Yes, because in order to protect the face value of government debt, they're having to increase interest rates in order to try and attract a little bit of money to buy our gilts, which is causing interest rates to go up. Now, I don't know why they said some mortgages could rise by £3,000. I actually worked out what it would be on my own mortgage. So I'm a big believer in mortgages, because you can borrow money at a lower rate than the current inflation rate. So effectively, it's free money. And what I did is, the moment that our previous but one bumbling Prime Minister came shuffling out onto stage to lock down the country, I immediately realised what economic carnage that was going to cause. And so I locked my inflation into a 10-year fixed rate at below 2%. So this morning I worked out how much it would cost if I had to remortgage today at current rates, and I'd be paying an extra £500 a month. So £6,000 a year. So yes, some mortgages might rise by £3,000 a year, others by 6k, and sort of everything in between as well.
Is it going to get to like early 90s crash scenario?
Well,
where
you
people
see, so
might have to start handing the houses back.
Yeah, here's the problem. Actually, I'll cover this under item number 5. They can't let these interest rates get too high, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The fourth item on this list is they're talking about inflation is going to slow down next year. Now, that one I'm going to give a highly qualified yes to, but this is the sort of jiggery pokery that officialdom engage in. So yes, inflation is almost certainly going to come down, but that's because inflation is a rate of change metric. It's not an absolute. What I mean by that, so let's say you're paying £100 a month for your energy bills. and then the next year you're paying £200 a month for your energy bill. You've experienced 100% inflation on your energy bill. But what if your energy bill goes up by another £100 a month the third year? So you're now paying £300 a month for your energy bill. Well, now you've only experienced a 50% inflation,
Right.
because it's got a higher comparison from the previous period. So yes, inflation will come down because inflation is that rate. So all it's saying is that the line doesn't go parabolic. So, this is how they can get us by making claims that they are doing something to address a situation where really the situation is just actually so screwed up that you're comparing screwed up with already screwed up.
It's the new normal.
Yes, exactly right. Now, coming back to your other point there, number 5, interest rates won't go up as much as expected. Yes, that is true, but that's not to help us with our mortgage. The reason for that is that the government, unlike the 70s, are the main holder of debt at this point. So back in the 1970s, and this is the thing that commentators often like to refer to, is they basically just put interest rates up to crush inflation. They're not going to do that now. It's because it's the government themselves who own all of that debt. So if they push up inflation rates at this time, they're going to bankrupt the government. At this current level, if all of the government debt were to have to roll over at current interest rates, they'd be spending about $150 billion a year on just debt servicing costs, which is almost as much as they spend on pensions, and it's not that far behind what they spend on our NHS. And that's just at 5.5%. So, you go much higher than that and the government as a whole breaks down. So it's perhaps not surprising with all of this, this is what prompted November's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, to give this article for The Times, which I think we can call up, where he explained the state can't fix all of your problems.
But we can certainly cause them.
Well, quite. And this is the thing. So I've been having a think. I was pondering this and saying, okay, well, what problems do we have? Well, the first one, inflation is hurting. Well, that's because the government has been printing vast amounts of money since 2008, and a particularly large amount of money at the beginning of the COVID crisis in 2020. So that's why inflation is hurting. Taxes are going up. Well, that's because they wasted $400 billion on lockdowns, as well as the billions, as we've already talked about, on Ukraine, immigration, COP, all of those things. So that's why our taxes are going up. Energy shortages. That's because you sanctioned Ukraine. And so you sanctioned Russia, which is the world's largest energy producer. What other problems have we got? Unemployment is soaring. Well, yes, again, see above. You asphyxiated the economy for 2 years. What other problems have we got? We've got these, as you referred to earlier, the yogurt-weaving lentilists who are gluing themselves to roads. The reason they're doing that is because the government is propagandizing them into believing that the world is going to blow up in 12 years unless they do something about it. I had a look at the Just Stop Oil website a little earlier today, and it is resplendent with quotes from government scientists up and down it. So, the government and these lentilists, they are on the same page on this one. The only thing they differ on is the timing. The government wants to get there to net zero by 2050, and the lentilists want to get there by 2030. It is simply a question of that. Right, violent crime. That's another problem that we've got, Rishi Sunak. Why have we got that? It's because you're importing 1 million people a year with little to no vetting. Societal norms are collapsing. That's another problem. Well, that's because the government is incentivising through its welfare policies and other policies the breakdown of standards at school and media. So that's why societal norms are collapsing. So actually, when I think about it, most of the problems that we have are caused by government. So he's probably right to say that he can't fix all of our problems, but it would be jolly nice if he could stop causing them. That's probably a little bit too much to ask. Anyway, so having trashed the financial system, they're probably going to be looking for an alternative. And I think this is something that you might want to touch on in your third segment, Connor.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the Epoch series, this one on the armistice of the First World War. If you'd like to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.